Support for current conversations is provided by Outreach Video and Media Services, University of Oklahoma Outreach, and World Literature Today. Welcome to Current Conversations. I'm R.C. Davis-Undiano. Today, we are on location at the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in Fort Worth, Texas. We'll be talking about race and white privilege with our special guest, Frances Kendall, a consultant for organizational change, specializing in issues of diversity and white privilege. Stay with us and meet this remarkable educator and activist. Frances Kendall, welcome to Current Conversations.
Thank you.
It's great having you on the show.
Thank you.
I feel like I have a very good friend on the show today. I've heard you speak and talk about social justice issues over the years so many times, and you're so wonderful to listen to, and you just have a way of capturing things that's always worked for me. But our audience doesn't know you the way I do.
Right.
Could you talk about what you do for a living and what you try to accomplish in your work?
Sure. I've been doing this work for 40 years. I'm one of those extremely lucky people who really gets every day she goes to work to do what she loves.
Okay.
I'm a consultant, and I work with colleges and universities across the country, doing work on and I work in predominantly white institutions, helping the administrators, et cetera, at those schools to create hospitable, welcoming communities and colleges and universities to students of color.
Yeah, it's not obvious to schools how to do that. I mean, they feel often a lot of good intentions, but they need some know-how, and that's what
I think they don't have a clue. I think that many think, well, if I just, put up pictures, they'll come. If I just...
There's some gimmick that's going to make it work.
Yes, and the fact is that there are all kinds of things you have to do. It's not just say, hey, come on down. And my goal is to really help them figure out what they, as an institution, can begin to do.
I would think this is difficult work at times because there could be very well-meaning people at an institution, and it turns out they don't realize how much resistance they have or how much resistance certain people have to making any changes at all. There must be times where you think they don't want us to succeed. I mean, there must be those moments.
Oh, several. There have been. I think that well-meaning white people are some of the hardest people to work with because they think it would be good, and yet, it sounds like a good idea. And yet, it's hard work. It's very hard work. It's hard personal work. It's hard interpersonal work, and it's hard organizationally. And so there has to be a genuine drive. You have to a school has to really know why it wants to change, because there are lots of changes. I remember I was working with a school, actually I've been there several times, and they kept saying they wanted to do it, and it would be good. And finally, I went back to speak to another group of folks there, and I titled what I was talking about, Creating a Genuinely Welcoming and Open Community Will Require Changing the Landscape. You can't just invite students of color into an institution that's all set up for white folks.
Had they not processed that they were actually going to have to change? It wasn't just embellishment of what they've already got, but there really needed to be a change in the faculty and the administrators?
I think there are very few schools who think that.
Right.
I think that they think, well, we'll just bring them in.
Yeah.
And of course, a long time ago, Michigan brought in a cohort of African-American people, but they hadn't done this was years ago, they hadn't done anything to change what was happening there. And they brought in faculty, I think, mainly at that point. And by a year and a half later, all the faculty was gone because it was clear it was a white school. It had been created by white people for white people, and that they were an afterthought. And really, they weren't sure, I think, why they were doing it.
Now, I would think to do the kind of difficult work that you do, where there are these sometimes hidden challenges and unexpected challenges, you really have to know who you are and what you're trying to achieve. I guess ultimately probably a good working definition of social justice, just to keep your own balance and your own orientation. Do you have such a working definition for yourself of social justice that you could share with us?
Sure, but let me go back to what you said before, which is that I do really have to know myself. I have to know why I do this. I have to know what it means to be a white woman doing work with other white people, because I think that's my job. And I'm always working in predominantly white institutions. I have to look at where I bump into my own biases, my own racism, and what it means to have grown up in Waco, Texas, what I learned there about my family's in cotton, and what I learned about slavery, lynching in Waco. And of course, there's lynching everywhere. I read today that there was a noose found at the new African American Museum at the Smithsonian in Washington that's just brand new. And this was their second noose found. So I really have to know who I am and what my hot buttons are. And, you know, finding a noose at that museum, I was really angry about. And so then I think I do have to know what my goals are for social justice. And because I've always thought really about racial justice. I know what justice is. And I was thinking last night, as I knew I was going to talk to you about, I was thinking about the scales on most, and the woman holding the scales on most.
Connect with courtrooms and the legal process.
Yes, yes. And I was thinking that really what she's holding, she's blindfolded, and what she's holding are scales that I think are relatively even, as though it's really a case of, well, if you get so much, then you get so much, then you get so much, then you get so much. And this really isn't about equality. It's really about equity, that people get what they need as opposed to everything is even. So for me...
So it's not a distribution of wealth, but possibility of access? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I would say both and. I think a distribution of wealth would be pretty great. It happens all the time for wealthy people. When the taxes are lowered, when the inheritance tax is removed, it happens all the time.
There don't seem to be many changes that really work against the wealthy. I've noticed that too.
No, they're not. And they're growing that work for the wealthy. So I think it's more of really seeing human beings who are very important parts of the United States, that they are critically valuable and important to the health of our country. And I don't think that's seen.
Do you think you're going to see any additional major advance in social equity in your lifetime? Are you optimistic about that, or?
No, I'm not really optimistic. But what I do, I think of Dr. King's quotation about the arc of
moral,
justice runs to the end toward justice.
Right.
And I remember Derek Bell when he was asked that if he would live to see racism gone. He said, no, not in my lifetime. And I'm 70, and I've been doing this work really intentionally for 50 years.
So you're not, you say you're not an optimist on this, but you're not a pessimist either.
No.
You see yourself contributing, and it's just going to take longer.
Absolutely. And I never think when I get up in the morning and am going to work, oh no, this is never going to work. I don't know where I'm going.
You feel like you're really contributing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, or at least I'm going to try to contribute, and to engage predominantly white people into thinking about themselves and thinking about what the world in which we live.
Now, was there a crystallizing experience in your education or when you were growing up that presented the idea to you that you could commit yourself to this kind of thing and that you could be effective, or somebody could be effective, you could be effective? Was there a role model or an experience that kind of pushed you in this direction?
I think there were two or three. I think of them as crucibles. I think one of the ones that pops up is going to National Cathedral School, which is a boarding school in Washington, D.C. Actually, it's not a boarding school anymore, but it was. And going to the house of one of the students. The 1961 was the first year that Cathedral integrated. And so there we had 3 people of color in our school. And we went to a class party, my first, I think it was in 10th grade. And I walked in, it was in the home of someone who was black. I had never been to a house that was owned by someone who was black. My mother had told me that they would be totally different, that there was nothing that would make me comfortable, and that it just wasn't going to be anything like where we lived.
What did she expect that you would see?
I don't know that she thought about that. I expected dirt floors. I'm not kidding. I think I'd read Little House on the Prairie at the very wrong time. And so I expected that there really wouldn't be anything similar. And so I walked into this house, and on the kitchen counter was a mixmaster. And it was exactly the same mixmaster that we had on our counter.
It's funny, those little details can say so much.
And I really thought I saw pieces of myself falling to the ground. That I was like, if this is another lie I've been told, what do I do here? And because a lot of my growing up was asking questions and feeling like I was being lied to about cotton, about slavery, et cetera. So that was one of my crucibles. The next one...
Crucible in a sense like a cross that people are bearing.
No, crucibles are, I think, brass bowls where you can get very hot and then melt metals and divide them.
Oh, okay.
So they're hot, they're painful, they're hot, and I think that was a crucible.
Okay.
The second one really was not so painful, which was going to work with the National Student YWCA. And the one imperative for the National YWCA is the elimination of racism wherever it exists and by any means possible. And so that was really where I grew up. That was where my home was, and their main office was in New York City. And that was where my home was for working on racism. And somebody looked at this white girl, from Waco, Texas, and thought, we think she has promise. And so I went into many, many trainings on white privilege, many trainings on looking at ourselves personally. There was sort of a whole group of us when we were students. I was at the University of Denver. And I loved it. It became my home. Because my interactions with my family around this were hard. They didn't find it humorous.
They didn't support you in going in this work?
I think they were dismayed.
Okay.
I don't think they didn't support me because I was too young to think, well, she's going to, it was like, well, she'll grow out of it and she'll go do something else.
Right.
But I didn't grow out of it. And so I think I knew that I had to separate myself from my family in some way. And I did. And I realized it's not that it was hard. It wasn't a hard decision, but it was very painful.
Yeah, the experience that you relate where you go into the home of a black family and it's completely different than what you imagined.
Yeah, look just like ours.
I really heard this from several people recently, and it's a thought I've had many times, that there are literally millions of Americans, white Americans, that don't have a black friend, that they've never met somebody from another country, and people can't care about what they don't know about in some basic way. And I think this is, when we talk about racism, it's not something anybody ever references, but a lot of white people have never met a black person or never really known one, and that cannot be helpful.
No.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of black people who don't really want white friends, because I think that most white people haven't done the work to be able to make a connection. I think black people look at us and really test us out for a long time.
They've been burned a lot.
Of course. And I mean, just like women, when they're making friends with men, check out what the privileged person is going to think of them when they have less privilege. It all has to do with privilege and institutionalized differences.
Yeah.
So I think African Americans are pretty careful about who they're going to make connections with, which white people. Although you hear white people say, oh yeah, I have a bunch of black friends. Well, how many? Well, I don't know about a bunch. Well, let's talk about how many that is. And well, maybe 2 or 3. And what do you do with them? And how often do you see them? I think that most white people don't have a lot of friends who are African American. And I think that most African Americans don't have a lot of friends who are white.
There's a writer, you probably know her, Joy DeGruy, that wrote Post-Slave Syndrome.
Yes.
And she does a really good job, I think, of doing a narration of what you said a moment ago, where in any social situation, black people are forced to see what's going on with the white people, make sure they're happy, or they're not disapproving. And it's a more complex scenario where they have to know what's happening in a way that white people probably don't need to.
Right.
Or at least don't bother
absolutely.
to. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that this is, it is intertwined in our history.
Right.
As Thurgood Marshall said, and he was he made a bunch of people really angry. He said, this country is founded on racism and on slavery. No, it's not. He's just anti-American, blah, 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 blah. It was 1976. Well, you look at the Constitution of the United States, and in Article 1, Section 2, it wasn't even Article 6. Mm-hmm. Article 1, Section 2, black people who are slaves, which is what most of the black people had been enslaved, will count as 3/5 of a person. And that wasn't even a racial issue. It was all about greed, actually. Yeah. It was all about white greed. Yeah. We want to not have to pay full taxes. We consider these people our property, but we don't want to pay full taxes on them. So we'll just pay 3/5 of a tax. So they're not really human and hold human. They're just 3/5 of a person. And they wanted that fifth to count so that they could have more representation in the Congress and the Senate. And so it's right there. The racism is right there.
It doesn't seem, this is your point, I think, it doesn't seem clear at all that the country's ever processed its dual sins, Indian removal and slavery.
Right. No, that's right.
Just seems to be undone work.
Right.
That it's maybe it's too late. Maybe that'll be processed in the future. But right as we speak, it's undone. That has not been understood.
I think most of us who are white live in white public space, which is virtually everything.
Yeah.
We don't walk into a building in Fort Worth, Texas, and think, this isn't our land. This is really native land. We walk in and think, this is all ours. Yeah. And everything is white public space. So I can go into a cafeteria and speak mock Spanish. I can have, a Taco Bell ad that is Yo Quiero Taco, this stupid Chihuahua who is speaking Spanish, and then be surprised when kids use mock Spanish.
In other words, anything other than white culture is going to be depicted as a caricature.
That's right.
In American culture.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any idea what we did to Native people. And I don't really think it's a contemporary understanding. I don't think most people, A, think of it, or B, see it.
Yeah.
We talk about the nation as a nation of immigrants. But really, it was a group of white people coming here and taking somebody else's land.
The one place, you make such an important point, one place I've noticed it does come up in Gothic horror films in Hollywood.
Yes.
Very often in The Shining and Poltergeist and so many, it turns out that a housing project or a hotel is built on native grounds.
It's being haunted.
It's being haunted, yeah. And as if there's this blood crime that has been pushed away.
Right.
And really the indigenous Holocaust. When,
Right.
Colonial people came to the Americas.
Right.
So, are you disappointed with where things are socially in America right now? And I just say this because so many people that do socially activist work seem to hark back to a time, maybe a decade ago, where social advancement seem to be within our grasp. And I think a lot of people in the country right now don't feel that that's the case at all, that it's moved back or we've entered a dark era. Would you
I think that's right. And I think, I know when I was growing up, we believed that we could make change.
Yeah.
I think that, because we stopped the Vietnam War.
Right.
And by that, what I mean is that we caused enough trouble, was hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who worked to stop that war. And it stopped. For all intents and purposes, of course, it didn't really stop. There were still people there. I think now people don't have any sense that we have any power.
You know, what I've heard from some thoughtful white people is that with what's come out in the last 10 years, the expressions of racism that seems to come out of the woodwork,
yes,
that they maybe love America a little bit less than they thought they did. That it's not quite the country that they thought it was, that they thought it had greater promise, and now it seems like that promise maybe wasn't there or it's been diminished, but their relationship with the country and its future just seems like it's a little smaller.
Huh. It makes me want to fight harder.
Yeah.
Because I love this country. And I've always loved it. I'm actually quite patriotic, which is interesting because of how I speak. People say, oh, well, she must hate this country. No, I believe I need to be here to do the work I do. So I haven't withdrawn at all. As a matter of fact, I've moved closer.
Double down.
Yes, because I'm 70. That's clearly, I know I've said that 5 times, but being 70 and knowing that my life is closer to an end than it was 10 years ago heightens my determination to work with younger folks so that they'll start doing that work in the country and continue. Many people are. And I do think that the racism has come out of the woodwork. And I think that it has had a lot to do with people who simply have not been heard by people like me. People who are probably poor or working class and have never felt that they have been seen or gotten what was fair. Look at coal miners, look at people who worked at U.S. Steel. And yet they see all of these other people getting wealthy.
Well, and they hear about white privilege, and then they've got to be asking the
question.
question.
They sure don't feel privileged.
Exactly.
And they see black people or Mexicans getting work, coming into the country and getting work, picking, but for which they're paid virtually nothing. But they have jobs. They don't have jobs people here want to do. So I think it's so complex. And it requires someone really wanting to know about it and believing that they can make change, which I think is essential. To hold that this is what we have today, and tomorrow we might be able to make a difference, or 10 years from now, or 15 years from now.
Would it be accurate to say that the large white population of the United States seems to break down to either people who have been left out of the conversation and are the working poor, or people that really do have white privilege and don't know that and would be offended if it were pointed out. And there's a kind of third rail. Nobody wants to upset them because they're often the wealthy, too, or the affluent. That seems like a deadly combination.
Yes, I think it is. And I think we're watching that happen. And the heartbreak is when people, and I'll be political here, about our president. I think he really told a lot of people that he would make difference for them. And now, in terms of health care, for example, if the Republican health care bill goes through, 24 million, not thousands, 24 million people will lose their health care.
A lot of the people who voted for him are going to be...
A lot of the people who voted for him. Yeah. One man I heard say the other day, my wife's going to have to stop her chemotherapy. These aren't, I think I'll go and have some kind of plastic surgery. These are life and death matters, no kidding. And these are the promises that he made, and now they've gone He's totally reneged. And he made them, we're going to open the coal mines again. Those coal mines are never going to be opened again.
For a variety of reasons.
For a variety of reasons, not just because of who works there. It's not possible. U.S. Steel, all of the buildings in Pittsburgh aren't going to suddenly be put back online.
No.
And so once again, the people who have been felt disenfranchised are going to feel disenfranchised again.
Francie, we've got probably under a minute, but I want to make sure to ask you this. I think a lot of people listening today or watching you say these things are going to be inspired by what you do, and I think really appreciate hearing about this. And they're going to say, well, but I'm not Frances Kendall. I don't have a job where I can try to influence the culture in such a broad way and think about these things the way she's had the opportunity to do, but they do want to do something meaningful in their lives. What would you say to them? What can they do to advance things in the right direction where they are in the jobs they have?
Start having conversations. And they may not go smoothly, but have conversations. White people having conversations with other white people is what's most important. It's not here, I'll go pick somebody who doesn't really want to be my friend, a person of color, and then want to have a conversation with them. It's really start talking with white people in your families, at work, to talk about issues of race.
Which takes some courage to stick your neck out there and maybe irritate people or annoy them.
I think if you go in with questions and say, I don't know, I'm working on this, I don't know. It's not coming in with answers. It's coming in with genuine questions. What is this about?
That's got to be an important
genuine
point.
and heartfelt questions.
Yeah.
I really want to know. I'm not preparing to tell you you're wrong. I'm not preparing to tell you I know. It is really, I don't know about this. And surely it could do a lot of continuing damage to our country if we don't start having those conversations.
I think we're going to have to stop there, but that's a very good point. Thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show today.
I'm so thrilled to do it.
That's all we have time for today. Please find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much for being a part of today's show. Join us next time for more current conversations.